Ballot Initiative 16 in Colorado. What is it? Why does it even have us here in Texas a little bit worried? That and much more with a special guest. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the People in Agriculture Show. I'm your host, Stephen Lloyd, and today we talk about Colorado. Colorado has once again found themselves at the forefront of what I would say agriculture controversy with the introduction of Ballot Initiative 16 or the PAWS Act. However, before we get into that, I'd like to bring on a guest who hopefully can make some sense of all of it. James Henderson, thank you for joining me today.
Good to be here. Looking forward to our conversation.
You're the current vice president of the Colorado Farm Bureau Federation. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was elected in November of 2020, uh, kind of during our COVID year. It was an interesting campaign to say the least, but
Yeah, I think so.
it had the opportunity to serve on the state board for about a year, and there was a change in our leadership, and felt the call to run for that position. The good people of Colorado Farm Bureau elected me to that position. So
That's
it's been
great. That's great.
been
I serve on the local county farm bureau board here in Texas, so I kind of understand that y'all are a lot on the what kind of policy issues that you have to deal with. But you're actually a practitioner. You actually farm and ranch. I mean, you can tell by your background. You got that pivot behind you that you're actually on the ground doing this stuff. What kind of operation do you run?
So our farm ranch is located in the San Luis Valley, uh, which is in south central Colorado. It's the world's largest alpine valley. We got to be famous for something, and that's what we claim. But it's a high mountain valley. We're the base ranch where I'm sitting right now is at 7,600 feet. We have summer cattle range that goes up to 10,000 feet above sea level. So we're high and we're also dry. We get less than 7 inches of precipitation here on the base ranch in a year. The surrounding mountains, get around 40 inches, and that comes a lot in the form of snow, which leads us to the irrigation that you see behind me.
Yeah.
But my family's been farming and ranching here on this same piece of ground since 1882. We raise them up, and then we wean them and hold them for about 45 days, and then sell them on down the road.
And you kind of cut out. Did you mention what kind of animals? I mean, what kind of cattle do you raise? I know it's a cow calf
Yeah,
operation.
so it's Hereford and Angus cross. So we're raising a lot of F1 Baldies and that kind of thing.
Outstanding. I like that. We have a Hereford registered Hereford seed stock operation. So some point we should talk Herefords, but uh,
There we go.
that's not the point of today. Today we need to look at Ballot Initiative 16, formerly called the PAWS Act, which stands for, I think, Protect Animals from Unnecessary Suffering and Exploitation. That kind of a mouthful as far as the name is. But before we get into that, this is a ballot initiative. That's what it is. Could you explain how that works in Colorado? How that's different than just going through the legislature?
Yeah, so in the state of Colorado, we have basically three ways in which laws are created. First and foremost, that we prefer is through the legislative process, um, House, Senate, signed by the governor. The other way, which I think we all became well acquainted with over the past year, is through executive order. And that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother
Sure.
time. And there's probably folks out there that are better versed in it than I. And those tend to be more temporary or rules that are made as part of an administration. And then in the state of Colorado, the framers of our state constitution thought that it would be important that an individual citizen could bring a issue to the people of Colorado for an up or down vote. So the way that works is you draft a law that you want to make, and you take it to the kind of experts at the Capitol, the lawyers that work at the Capitol that help our state senators, state representatives draft the laws. They give some advice whether or not they're trying to affect the right area of statute, and make a determination in some suggested language. They don't talk about merit, but then it goes to what is called the title board, where the two most important things happen. Number one is the setting of the title, what the voters will read as it appears on the ballot. It's a description of what the new law does. And then it has to pass what's called the single subject test. That is basically a test of, is it just dealing with one thing? The way I like to describe this, and apologize to all the Dallas Cowboy fans, but you cannot run a ballot initiative that says the Dallas Cowboys are the best football team and the Denver Broncos the worst. It can be, are the Dallas Cowboys the best football team, or are the Denver Broncos the worst football team? Okay. One of our big problems with this initiative is we feel, aside from the merit, is that it does not fit that single subject criteria, which is very important. We'll get to more of that in just a minute. From that title board and an appeal process, which we'll talk about, you have to gather 127,000 signatures to get it onto the ballot, and those have to be registered voters in the state of Colorado. At that point, it is on the ballot, and it gets an up or down vote from the citizens of Colorado. What the proponents of this particular initiative have done is kind of, we've seen this in the last couple of years, given themselves a lot of time. So this is to appear on the ballot in 2022. So they've given themselves a lot of time to collect the signatures and to really have an ample amount of time to campaign.
Okay. So what stage? I know it's a pretty extensive process that they have to go through, and but what stage are they on? The signature stage right now of it?
So where we're at is they've been through the title board and had the title set and had the single subject determination made by the title board. We appealed that decision to the title board. It's been about a month ago, and we're not able to overcome the title board's original decision.
I caught on that. They've pretty much said that it could move forward. I know, and we'll probably get into it here after a while, that there's a Supreme Court going on right now. There's a case going on right now, and actually, I think a lot of the stuff was put in yesterday, so it's pretty recent. I guess before we get into all of that, let's kind of get into what the meat of this whole meat, ironically, is of this particular ballot initiative. What is this? What is it supposed to do? What's its goal, I guess?
So the overall goal, we feel, is it's a thinly veiled attempt to end animal agriculture in the state of Colorado, is the true intent of the proponents of this bill. The way in which they're choosing to do that is twofold. The first is around redefining the laws around a sexual act with an animal, excuse me to your viewers, that would prohibit and make a crime any contact with an animal's genitalia or anus. Okay, so right off the bat, that precludes you being able to artificially inseminate, preg check by palpation, as well as fertility test bulls. There's a lot of concern whether or not that this would apply to spaying, neutering animals, as well as a litany of other things that your imagination can go wild. But what it would do is criminalize common animal husbandry practices, and it would criminalize our veterinarians and ranchers that do them. The other part of the initiative would prohibit the slaughter of animals until they've reached a quarter of their natural lifespan. And I put that in air quotes because the act prescribes what the lifespan of an animal is.
Yeah.
And so for a cow, or bovine, they prescribe that as 20 years. So you would not be able to slaughter in the state of Colorado a animal until it's reached 5 years of life. You wouldn't be able to slaughter a chicken until it's 2 years old. You wouldn't be able to slaughter a hog until it's 4 or 5. I need to look up what they determine the natural lifespan there to be. Interestingly enough, they also prescribed prescribed a natural lifespan for fish. So you wouldn't be able to, I guess, catch a fish and eat it until it's 2 years old. It's very bizarre.
I'm not sure how you would determine. I guess there's ways you can determine the age of fish. Well, okay. How, just since you ranch, how many cattle do you have that have actually reached the age of, their full lifespan? I mean, where are they getting this number from? Because 20 years old, we don't have a lot of cattle, even taking care of them as best we can, that make it to 20.
I think what they look for is the statistical outlier of what's possible, and that's how they're coming up and backing into that number. We've had, I think, one cow that brought us 18 calves, and she kind of became a pet after
Yeah,
so long.
yeah.
She was one of the last. She passed on, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years ago, but she was the last replacement my heifer my grandpa kept when he was alive in 1988. So she was kind of a family pet. But most what we call in the industry running age cattle are gonna, probably peak out about 10 years,
Yeah.
And not have sufficient teeth to be able to get the nutritional requirements that they need to raise a calf.
Well, I saw that this was started by, of course, animal activists, or I assume it's more towards the vegan activist kind of thing that they're doing. I actually, for the record, I did reach out to them to come onto the show, and surprisingly, one did respond back that they're a little busy with signatures and the Supreme Court issue, so they might in a few weeks, but we'll see if that actually happens. But that does bring us to the Supreme Court case, which has already been, the opening briefs have already been brought to the court. It was actually yesterday. What's the challenge that is being put into this in this case?
So, and that's an important distinction, you know, at this juncture. We are not still not talking to the court about whether or not this is a good idea, whether or not it's constitutional. We're still debating whether it's single subject and whether the language prescribed in the title is sufficient that an average voter could discern what they're actually voting on. And so in that brief, we've laid out three distinctive things that this piece of this act does. Okay. Number one is it deals with the laws around sexual acts with an animal. Okay, that's one issue that it covers. The second is it redefines the definition of livestock to include fish. And then the third is the meat issue. And so we argue that there's three things which obviously wouldn't qualify as the single subject criteria.
Okay.
And then we'll go ahead.
Well, what would stop? I mean, if it did actually shut this one down, but what would stop them from just coming back and starting over with just one of the issues? Then, I mean, they could just pretty much what you'd be facing, I assume.
That's exactly right. We'd be, we get this one kicked out and we just look to the horizon again to see what they come back with. And that's a conversation about ballot reform. Up to this point, the proponents of this particular ballot initiative haven't spent a dime to do this that we're aware of. It does not have any cost associated with them. If they want to defend their legal brief and have a chance of winning, they'll probably need to hire a lawyer at this stage at the Supreme Court, but they may be able to find like-minded people to do pro bono work
Yeah.
out of the animal activist industry. I do like to call it an industry because they're very much interested in making money themselves.
Yes. I
And
can
I
see
do
that.
also find it interesting that they did actually get back to you because they haven't returned hardly any media request heretofore.
Yeah. Well, the email I got was actually, it was from I think it was Alexander Sage. He was one of the guys that started this, and uh
Mhm.
and he said a podcast, that's an interesting request. So maybe he's thinking it's just a different, instead of the media. I don't know. I don't know what the deal.
Yeah,
But if he wants to come on, I'd be glad to kind of get his
you bet.
view of what he's thinking on this. On the
Mhm.
Supreme Court, is there a timeline as to when
What,
you might hear from them?
because this is set for the 2022 ballot, they're not in a huge time crunch. So we expect that late June, mid July, that we'll have a decision out. So up until then, they cannot collect signatures. So until it's released from the Supreme Court, say we lose our case, and they're allowed to move forward, then they have to submit their petition to the Secretary of State uh, that basically makes sure that when they're out gathering signatures and people look at the petition, it's a reflective of what's actually going to appear on the ballot. And then that would be the next step for them. So there's no signature gathering going on at this point, but it's on the horizon for them.
Yeah.
Just an interesting note on signature gathering: if they use a professional firm to do that, it's a business in the state of Colorado and other states that have this type of ballot process, but that'll cost them about $1 million to $1.5 million to get those signatures.
Wow. Okay. Oh, okay. Well, let's assume that Supreme Court rules in favor of this initiative, and it proceeds forward. Obviously, uh, the entirety of Colorado and even all of us throughout the country need to kind of know and be educated on the ramifications of what this would mean, because I think that's a lot of what even us as farmers and ranchers anywhere need to do, is kind of educate. So, because a lot of people don't, they're disconnected from farming and ranching community, and has been for 2 or 3 generations now. And so, what, first off, what impact would this law have on the economy in Colorado, and then reaching into neighboring states, even including us here in Texas? Rough time right now for the internet, I guess, for me. Okay, I got you back, I think.
There you are.
There
There
it
you are.
is.
Yep. Rural broadband. Let's get that thing
Yeah,
going,
that's
huh?
a discussion.
Uh,
We're on that.
yeah, you bet. So impacts to the state of Colorado. Colorado isn't obviously as large of an agricultural state as Texas, but we're $47 billion overall in net receipts. On the animal ag side of that, particularly on the meat side, we're about $7 billion. And so it's significant. We have a JBS processing plant in Weld County, and then we have a Cargill plant in Morgan County. So those two uh, plants would immediately be shut down and move out of state. They'd be shuttered under this law, which is, we're talking thousands and thousands of jobs. There's about 1.1 million cattle on feed last time I checked in the state of Colorado. Uh, that industry, they could, I guess, supposedly still feed them here, but they would have to truck them out of state to be harvested. So that would be a huge impact, and I think we just see those cattle migrate to other high plains feed yards. So you might get more cattle in North Texas.
Yeah.
But one of the things that has really changed in the state of Colorado in the last 10, 15 years is Leprino, which is a cheese processor, put a enormous plant into Greeley, Colorado, which is in Weld County. Weld County is now the #4 dairy county in the country.
Wow.
And Weld County is the #2 agricultural county in the country as well. And so a tremendous impact to that community, which is just furthering problems. They have the oil and gas located in that county as well, which has been under attack, and so that particular rural economy would be decimated. Obviously, without the ability to artificially inseminate cattle and to spread those good genetics out more prolifically, our sustainability goes way down. You know, we're producing, you know, an equivalent amount of milk, of meat in the cattle industry as we did in the 1970s, but we're doing it with 40 million less cattle. And a lot of that's through advances in AI, embryo transfer, just getting good genetics out into the countryside, making us more sustainable, making us efficient, making the quality of our product better. And we just take a huge scientific step backwards towards animal husbandry practices of really pre 1900.
Yeah.
And it's just the wrong direction that the industry needs to move right now, because we need to become increasingly sustainable to stay in this business and to do what's right by our consumers and continue to give them the products that they need. But you know, the impact on the dairy industry would be catastrophic, as you well know, being in Texas. This alfalfa field behind me, we didn't grow a ton of alfalfa here back until the 90s, when all the dairy started moving out of California to New Mexico and Texas. So when we harvest this hay here in a few weeks, that's going to go into New Mexico and Texas to support the dairy industry. The dairy industry will move to where they can function. And the hole that leaves in our rural communities is going to be unfillable.
That's true. Well, I understand your Governor Polis, came out against this initiative recently, but, and preface that, will that even matter given the fact that he was extremely adamant about advocating for that, was it Meat Out Day in March? I mean, he was a big proponent of that. So is this kind of just him playing the political card, I guess, or is he worried?
Yeah, no, I mean, the rural vote in Colorado isn't going to vote for Jared Polis anyway.
No.
I mean, after a long train of abuses from the oil and gas industry, and with the Meat Out proclamation, that he's not going to win that vote back, and he didn't get it in the first place. The complexity with the Meat Out proclamation is when we typically do proclamations in the state of Colorado, because we have them for ag, right? And then he subsequently did one for, you know, for cattle growers appreciation and that kind of thing. But they're generally positive language. And our major problem with the Meat Out proclamation is we would sure like the governor to be positive about, you know, the second largest industry in the state, and to show that. But you know, his office has come out against it. Part of the complicating factor in that is the governor's spouse is a very very outwardly spoken animal rights activist.
Oh.
And so that creates some, I think, conflict internally for the governor. And in fact, to my understanding, the proponents of this initiative sit on a animal rights board of directors with the first gentleman.
Okay, that makes a little bit of sense there then. Well, one other quick thing, and the reason this kind of caught my attention here is one, that it affects us too with the meat industry, and we have our own fair share of people that could do this here in Texas. But this ballot initiative is concerning because only 2 years ago, through the same process, I guess, Colorado passed that wolves reintroduction deal. Could you tell me a little bit about that? Because it seems like it's on the same sort of pattern that's going on there.
Yep. So in 2020, November 2020, the state of Colorado had another ballot initiative to reintroduce wolves into what we call west of the Continental Divide. Continental Divide being, you know, us being a headwater state, the western slope goes to the Pacific Ocean, The eastern slope goes to the Atlantic Ocean, and actually where I'm at on the Rio Grande headwaters, that goes on down to the Gulf of Mexico. But
Yeah.
what that was reintroducing wolves west of the Continental Divide. The interesting math on that is our population center is on the east side of the Continental Divide in what we call the Front Range from Fort Collins to Colorado Springs. That's where the 80% of the people in the state of Colorado are. That ballot initiative passed by 0.8%, which was very interesting, but we just came up a little bit short. But through messaging and through the campaign, we were able to move from the initial polling that was going to pass by about 17%. We got it to 0.8%. But it's concerning. And the reason that we need to look at the ballot process in the state of Colorado, that one population that is unaffected by an issue can impose their will on another geographic area within the state. And that's a very concerning pattern. We have a legislature for a reason that lets everybody engage in the process equally. And the ballot initiative process really lends itself to whoever's able to raise the most money typically wins in those.
Yeah.
Now I will say that, the impulse may be just get rid of the ballot initiative process.
Yeah.
But in the state of Colorado, we use our ballot for very positive things as well. We anytime there's a tax increase in the state of Colorado, whether it's your local town, your county, or something statewide, you have to take that tax increase to the voters and make your case. And that serves as a huge protection on us, especially as we've seen the politics shift in the state. We're becoming a very left state. Bernie Sanders has won the last two presidential election or primary elections in the state of Colorado. Of course, Joe Biden won the state of Colorado. But interestingly, in that same election where Joe Biden won the state of Colorado, we also voted to lower our income tax by 0.25%. Wow. And so there's the politics of Colorado are very interesting. But as you well know, things are changing very quickly. I know Texas picked up 2 House seats in the latest census. We picked up 1. We're a state about 5 million people, but we had 750,000 plus people move to the state of Colorado in the last 10 years. That's 205 people moving here a day. And it's just really shifting the politics of the state of Colorado.
That is big, yes. James, I appreciate you breaking this whole process down for us. Here in Texas, some of us are very aware of what's going on up there, and we're going to fight right beside you on this issue and any others that may arise that's harmful or even detrimental to the agriculture community. I think that's important. I want to end our talk today with the question I sent you yesterday because it's part of what I like to call it's an old-fashioned talk segment. Not only do I enjoy a good old-fashioned, which hopefully someday we can meet up and partake in one, hopefully celebrating this initiative failing. But I enjoy those talks I've had with my grandparents and elders where they pass this wisdom on to us without really them even knowing it. And I feel as though with technology the way it is, many people in the younger generations, they're missing out on that. Is there any sort of advice or story that you garnered in this way from your elders?
My grandpa, the ranch comes down through my mom's side of the family. And my grandpa always talked about, he died in a farm accident when I was relatively young, about 12 years old. So one of the big regrets and one of the things I look forward to once we get to the other side is having that adult conversation with my grandfather and just talking about the change that he saw in his lifetime, being born in 1911 to his death in 1993. He saw just a huge amount of changes over his course from, this field that I'm sitting in. He took out a sagebrush with a team of horses and a railroad iron, and just that grit and determination. But what he used to talk about a lot is that you've got to get up and fight for it every day. And as I've gotten a little bit older, I've started to understand that there's headwinds in everything we do. Agriculture's unique in that we fight the weather, we fight the markets, we fight against a lot of things, and increasingly we've got to fight on the political side as well. Even states like Texas that feel like they've got a pretty good footing under them and understand what agriculture is. Your politics are changing.
Yeah.
The that growth is happening in urban, and they're different experiences. One of the things I think that I take away from that, and what I'd encourage you and your listeners to do is, as we fight, you got to fight in the right way. You got to be right, but you got to be right in the right way, in order to affect change. I mean, we can sit here and talk about our points, talk how we're right all day long, but we're not the people we need to convince. We need to get out and think about what's important to those that we need to move. That movable middle is the most important part of the country right now. And we need to understand how to connect with them, how to share what we're doing in agriculture. And that's going to head off some of these problems. And that's where organizations like the Farm Bureau, Cattlemen's, some of these other organizations come in. Is their grassroots organization, and they will invest a lot of time and money in you to be able to have that conversation with the movable middles. So, fighting every day and fighting for what you've got is part of the thing now, but we got to fight in the right way.
I agree with you. And like I said, we're right there with you, fighting on it. And for so long, agriculture, I guess, has kind of been, we're in that expectation that everybody's just going to be behind us because, they got to eat something. But I think it's, we're on the defense all the time. And I think it's time we stepped up and did some offense, actually get out there and really start sharing this message. And I appreciate you doing that, and telling us what's all going on up there, because it is important. So thank you for sharing that. And that brings us to the end of our show today. Thank you again, Mr. Henderson, for joining me and talking about Ballot Initiative 16. We do need to get the word out about this, so please share this video, subscribe to this channel. I'm going to get into these issues and more that farmers and ranchers are facing today. And so until next time, thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next week.